That house is mine because I built it. You need to leave now, even if we split. I don't think you can survive on your part-time salary." Steve laughed as he happily laid out the divorce papers. "My name is Katie. I'm 33 years old. Recently, I started working part-time at a nearby supermarket. I married Steve 3 years ago after we hit it off at the same workplace. I resigned at the same time. I wanted to keep working even after getting married, but he insisted that I stay home. So, I reluctantly became a full-time housewife. However, I had always loved working, and the desire to work outside kept growing day by day. After much persuasion, I finally managed to get a part-time job. We want children but haven't been blessed with any yet. I love cats and wanted to get a pet. But Steve hates cats, so I reluctantly gave up on the idea. Steve, who originally wanted me to be a full-time housewife, didn't like that I started working part-time and started complaining about everything I did. You went to your job again today, huh? Recently, the house seems to be getting dirtier. Aren't the laundry clothes all wrinkled? You're not keeping up with the housework at all." That wasn't true. I had finished cleaning before going to work, and the laundry was perfectly stretched out. "What are you talking about? I'm doing everything as perfectly as before. It's obviously dirty. Where are your eyes? And the food is always the same. Fried chicken again. Today, can't you make a variety of dishes?" I didn't make fried chicken that often, and I tried to be creative with the meals every day despite the limited time. "I've worked hard to make your favorite fried chicken, and I've prepared many dishes." When I talked back a little, he would return with double the intensity. "Are you saying you don't have time because of your part-time job? You just pretend to be busy. Don't act so important with just a small job that doesn't even make much money. My earnings were enough in the first place, and it's only because of your selfishness that you're working. Make sure you do the housework properly. Don't make excuses about not having time. It's shameful to sweat and work for such a low hourly wage." Steve always ridiculed my job with abusive words. He had said that he wanted me to be a housewife because he didn't want others to think we were struggling financially. For the sake of his own image, he mocked my part-time work every chance he got, boasting that he made enough money that we didn't need to worry about living expenses. No matter that he was my husband, being demeaned for my work with such horrible words was something even I cannot tolerate. I was infuriated by his words every day. One day we decided to go for a drive to visit Steve's parents' home, where we hadn't been for a while. Although I have been irritated with Steve for a long time, I was happy to go out for a change, since it had been a while. At that time, I had no idea what would happen at my in-laws' house. After driving for a few hours, we arrived at Steve's parents' home, where his mother, who lived alone, greeted us with a smile. After dinner, which she had prepared, Steve went out to play slots. While doing the dishes with my mother-in-law, her demeanor seemed to change. She was no longer the calm person she had been, and her face became stern as I made coffee, wondering what was wrong. We sat on the sofa, and she began to speak. "Katie, according to Steve, you're working a part-time job. Why do you need to work when he is working so respectably? Also, I hear that you're not managing the housework because you don't have enough time or something due to your part-time job." I was a bit surprised by her sudden words. "No, that's not true. I'm managing everything properly." My mother-in-law, with exaggerated surprise, said, "Oh, I've heard from Steve all about how terrible you were at housework. Lying is useless. He has been enduring this alone. He's tired from work, and it's really pitiful that he has to return to a house full of garbage. You're not making decent meals, are you? Quit that part-time job. No one at your workplace will care if you're not there. They can just hire someone else. Your job is to take care of the house. All right, from now on, focus on the house and properly support Steve. Really, don't embarrass yourself as Steve's wife." My mother-in-law has old-fashioned beliefs, thinking that a wife should stay at home. She got married right after finishing school and has never worked, always being a full-time housewife. Steve also grew up believing that's how a wife should be. That's why both of them dislike the idea of me working outside. Nevertheless, my mother-in-law's words were too harsh. She not only dismissed the job I was working so hard at, but also crudely said that no one would be troubled if I quit. Those heartless words deeply upset me. My part-time job was fulfilling, and everyone was kind. The atmosphere was very positive. Everyone treated me well and relied on me. It was heartbreaking to be spoken about as if I were unnecessary, while she doesn't even know any of this. It was also quite a shock to discover that Steve had been bad-mouthing me behind my back, even though I did take care of our home properly. In fact, I had been working harder than ever on the household chores so that they didn't get neglected because of my part-time job. I knew his job was tough, so I was trying my best to accommodate that. But Steve and his mother were bad-mouthing me over the phone. I didn't want to believe it. After being told such awful things, I was very down for a few days. But then I suddenly remembered my father's face. Since my mother passed away, my father had been living alone in our family home. He lived a bit far from me, and I hadn't visited him recently because I have been busy. I wanted to hear my father's voice, so I called him. Usually, he answers the phone quickly, but that day, the ring went on for a long time. Just as I started to worry, he finally answered. "Katie, it's been a while. Are you well?" Hearing my father's calm voice, I was so relieved that tears started to flow. "What happened? You took a while to answer the phone." "If you're busy, I can call back later," he said, seeming to catch his breath. "No, I'm sorry. I fell down the stairs recently and hurt my back. I can't move around much now. But don't worry about me. I'll be fine soon. By the way, what's up? Is anything wrong?" I was really surprised. My father, who used to be so athletic, had fallen down the stairs and hurt his back. "No, I'm fine. Just make sure to take care of yourself and get better soon. I'll come to visit you soon, so wait for me." "Yeah, I'm okay," he replied. But then I thought, he's already considered elderly, and injuries might take longer to heal. I had always been reassured by his vitality, but suddenly I felt anxious. If he keeps using the stairs every day, he might slip again. Moreover, the stairs in the old family home are a bit steep, and there are high steps in the entrance and bathroom. I became very worried about my father living in that house while protecting his back. What if something happens and he gets seriously injured? I couldn't just sit still. I had always thought it would be good to live closer to him, but I realized there was no time left to hesitate. I made a major decision to build a safer, more accessible home for my father nearby. I had a source of income that I had kept hidden from my husband. I had inherited apartment management from my grandfather. It was originally meant to be my father's, but he had put it in my name in case of emergencies. He had told me it was better not to talk much about it so my husband didn't know. I had saved all the rental income up to now. I would use that money to build a new house for my father. I had caused a lot of worry and hadn't been able to do much to repay him, so now I felt elated thinking about giving my father the best gift of his life. Although I would build it myself, it would involve a lot of money, and I couldn't just keep it a secret. I needed to get Steve's understanding. I was nervous he might come, complain, and reject the idea, but instead he said, "I see. That makes sense. Considering his age, a new house might be better. If a part-timer like you can manage that, then go ahead and try. Just don't come crying to me if you can't do it." He insulted me again, which infuriated me. But arguing would only complicate things further, so I decided to hold back and not retort this time. This made things easier for me. I immediately started looking for a good contractor and moved forward with the process. It seemed that Steve was not pleased with the idea of me actually building the house. He didn't voice any complaints, so I tried not to mind it. But he was not usually the type to stay quiet. One day, I was shocked when I went to the bank to withdraw money for groceries. Our living expenses had been reduced by $3,000, withdrawn all at once. I had no recollection of spending such a large amount of money. There could only be one person who could have done this. That night, I confronted him. When I went to the bank today, I found that $3,000 had been withdrawn from our living expenses. "Do you know anything about this?" Steve arrogantly replied, "I gave it to my mother." You said you were going to build a house, so you must have been saving up somewhere, right? $3,000 isn't a big deal. I couldn't believe my ears. Why do you have to give her money? Your mother isn't exactly broke, is she? Besides, that's our living expense. It's too selfish to give away such a large sum without even asking me. He snapped back. What do you know about my mother? She said she was struggling. What's wrong with a son helping his mother? Besides, that money was earned by me. How I use it is none of your business. If it bothers you, try earning as much as I do with your part-time job. See, you can't say anything. Don't ever complain about what I do again. After shouting at me, he stormed out of the room. I had always believed that despite his harsh words, Steve would never betray me. It would have been better if he had just discussed it with me. If he wanted to give money to his mother, maybe there would have been a better way, and this argument might have been avoided. Did he think I would oppose it, or did he not trust me? Instead of our marriage bringing us closer, it felt like our hearts were drifting apart. Steve didn't seem to think there was anything wrong with using the money without consent, and the next day, he acted as if nothing had happened and went to work after breakfast. I didn't say more because I didn't want another argument, but I couldn't shake off my uneasy feeling. Meanwhile, the new house was finally completed. Despite the hustle, the kind construction company provided lots of support, and I managed to build a beautiful house. I had asked my father to pack up some of his things but not overexert himself, and I arranged for movers to handle everything for him. With just 2 weeks left until moving day, I was overflowing with joy at the thought of doing something filial for my father in the house I had built. On the day I planned to help my father unpack in the new house along with Steve. When I tried to discuss the arrangements for the day, Steve said something unbelievable. Hey, that house isn't for your father. It's going to be for my mother. I have the right to decide who lives in the house I built, so it's going to be my mother who lives there. I couldn't understand what he was saying. In a panic, I responded, I built that house. It's for my father to live in. There's no way a part-timer like you could build a house. It's my money that built it, so don't get cocky. It seems he truly believed that it was his money that built the house. When I discussed building the house the other day, he easily accepted my idea. Was it because he planned from the start to make it for his mother, not my father? That's a terrible way to do things. Now, I had to prove that I built it with my money. I had no choice but to tell him about the rental income I had kept secret until now. I made up my mind to tell him about it. You made up a ridiculous story just because you want the house. House it as you like. If you're going to lie, at least make it a decent one. He didn't believe me at all and went somewhere. I was at a loss but had no choice but to explain until he understood. As I waited for him to return, he came back with an incredibly grim expression and then blurted out, Hey, you tried to deceive me, claiming you built that house. You're a liar. That house is mine because I built it. You need to leave now. Even if we split, I don't think you can survive on your part-time salary. I was at a loss for words due to the suddenness of it all. That house was built by me, and besides, telling me to leave so suddenly was too much. Sign this and get out tonight. He laughed as he slammed the divorce papers on the table and went to his room. His section was already filled out. After continually belittling me, presenting the divorce papers like that was truly the lowest he could stoop. He must have done this terrible thing to drive me to despair. He probably thought that by bringing up divorce, I would give in and let his mother live in that house. But unfortunately for him, I had enough income to live on my own without him. This act of his was the last straw for me. I signed the divorce papers and submitted them, then hurriedly packed my bags and left the house to go to my father's home. My father was surprised to see me arriving suddenly with big luggage, but he warmly let me come in. After I told him everything that had happened up to today, he patted my back and said, "You've had a tough time. Then you can live with me in the new house." That would make me happy. The moving day arrived, and everything went smoothly because I was there. We successfully moved in without any problems. I found it a bit eerie that my ex-husband hadn't made any contacts after making such a fuss, claiming the house was his. But I tried not to worry because I didn't want to think about someone I was divorced from. Then, a few days after starting life in the new house with my father, something unbelievable happened. It was noisy outside, and when I looked out the window, I saw a large moving truck stopped, claiming they were moving to this house. I hurried to the mover and asked what was happening. It turned out the customer was actually my ex-husband, and he would soon arrive with his mother to move in. They planned to forcefully move into this house, where my father and I were already living. Since we were divorced, he was a complete stranger, and it would be troublesome if they just showed up. Feeling a creepy kind of fear about my ex-husband's forceful intentions, I explained the situation to the confused movers and asked them to stop their work. Then I discussed it with him. My father and I hurriedly called the police. When I explained everything to them, they confirmed that the house was my property, and since my ex-husband and I were divorced, he had no rights to live here. Merely entering against my will could be considered trespassing. Then my ex-husband and his mother arrived nonchalantly. Seeing the police, they started panicking. At that moment, he finally understood that I was the one who built the house. However, with his mother panicking beside him and being bombarded with questions by the police, he had already lost his composure and shouted, "What is this? Why can't I live in this house?" Looking at him, I thought I was done dealing with such a person. But to protect my father and myself, I handed over the final weapon to the police. Although the situation calmed down thanks to the police, I heard that my ex-husband faced serious consequences. Later, he was serious about living in this house, so he had canceled his apartment lease and even sold his mother's house, leaving him with no place to return to and with a breach of contract fee demanded by the movers and a truckload of belongings. He literally found himself stranded on the street with his mother. The final weapon I handed to the police was the evidence of the verbal abuse, essentially domestic violence, that my husband had subjected me to. Having been unable to endure my husband's abusive language any longer, I had thought of getting back at him someday and had installed surveillance cameras to record everything. The footage showed me diligently doing housework and my husband constantly spouting unreasonable abuse. Using this footage, I managed to further corner my ex-husband. I hired a lawyer and sued him and was able to extract a settlement from him. The expenses from the moving chaos and the settlement I received from him depleted the money he got from selling his mother's house and his own savings. Now he and his mother are reportedly living in a rundown apartment. Word of this spread quickly at his workplace. Realizing there was something wrong with his character, his colleagues distanced themselves, and now he is isolated and frowned upon by everyone at the company. As for me, I finally got to own a cat. My father's back has completely healed, and we're discussing taking a trip with the cat. I'd also used the settlement money to open a shop dealing with cat goods. It was challenging at first, and there were failures, but gradually customers increased, and the business is doing well. Every day is peaceful and truly enjoyable. I never thought that the action I took for my father's sake would lead to my own happiness. I truly feel that it was the right decision. Recently, there has been a happy development. A man who always comes to my shop and chats pleasantly has been particularly kind to both people and cats. We've made plans to go for a drive together. I'm going to live my life freely and enjoyably. I'm excited about the new happiness that's about to begin.